by comparing the India and South Africa, by comparing the India and the South African constitutional and the political systems, between India and the South Africa. First one is the origin. The origin of the South African Constitution was an outcome of anti-apartheid struggle. Outcome of anti-apartheid struggle. Anti-apartheid struggle of South Africa, which made two important ethos in the South African Constitution. One was the human dignity. One was the human dignity. One was the human dignity and reconciliation. Human dignity and the reconciliation. Whereas the Indian Constitution was the outcome of the freedom struggle of anti-colonial. It was the anti-colonial freedom struggle. Anti-colonial struggle. Anti-colonial struggle in which the Constitution of India inherently idealized the importance of the human liberties, status and opportunities, liberty and status and opportunities, in which the striking features of the South African Constitution, it was the presidential democracy, a presidential democracy with the separation of powers, the separation of powers as well as the power places of the state of South Africa. So power places, South Africa's administrative capital is Pretoria. South Africa's legislative capital is Cape Town. South Africa's judicial capital is Maufontein. Whereas that is the presidential democracy. Whereas it was the parliamentary democracy in India. Parliamentary democracy in which legislative control on executive exists. It was the Council of Ministers exercise control on the administrative systems or the permanent executive of the state of India. That was the striking features between the Indian and South African Constitution. Then the striking features represent in federation. Federation of India. India was a federal state with the striking features of union control, a striking features of union control, a federal state with the striking features of the union control, in which the distribution of powers between union and the state in the 7th schedule of the Constitution. But South Africa represents a federal state of greater autonomy, an autonomous federal state of three-tier system, a three-tier federation. One is the federal government of the South Africa. the federal government of South Africa, then 9 provinces of the South Africa, provincial government of the South Africa, then the local government of the South Africa, the local government of the South Africa, local government of the South Africa. That seems to be a striking difference between India and the South African constitution. But there exist similarities in the fundamental rights, similarities in regard to democracy and sovereignty. How the South Africa and India mutually contributed, the mutual contributions, how South African constitution in India, how the Indian constitution contributed South Africa. Indian constitution, India contributed South Africa. Indian constitution contributed South Africa with the doctrine of basic structure. It is the doctrine of basic structure. Both the India and South Africa established constitutional supremacy. It is the doctrine of basic structure that India contributed to the South Africa on the constitutional supremacy, that India contributed to the South Africa. Then what does South Africa contributed to India? What South Africa contributed to India? South African constitution had made a greater contributions to India in the form of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Truth and Reconciliation Commission, in which the South Africa contributed to Sri Lanka, as well as the Supreme Court of India in the abolition of Article 370 case. In abolition of Article 370 case, in which the Supreme Court of India, in the abolition of Article 370 case, but the abolition of Article 370 for Jammu Kashmir case, in which the Supreme Court, Justice Kaul directed India to appoint a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, with the constitutional state, with the statutory power to examine, to inquire into the violation of the human rights by the state of India as well as by the terror organization, non-state actors in Jammu Kashmir, in which the South African constitutional experience contributed to India. Okay.